The next one is there's a lot of environmental factors that are difficult for you to control as a parent. Where you live, the weather, the access you have to food. So depending on where you live in the world, you may have varying levels of access to healthy foods. For example, if you lived in certain neighborhoods in, say, the Quad Cities, there's no grocery store nearby. So where do you go? You go to the 7-Eleven that's nearby, or you order in fast food, right? So there's many of those things that are out of your direct control as a parent, and those are many of those things that are responsibilities of the community and of society at large to help you be a successful parent. So a couple of examples. I also, some of the things that is interesting to think about is much of our world is anti-child and really doesn't provide a safe place for children to grow up. So I have a couple of examples. Like one of them is corporal punishment is still common around the world. Something like 60% of the world's children experience corporal punishment in the home. So misbehavior, being hit, or other kinds of physical harm to the child that kind of respond to behavior issues. My example of being anti-child is that's still allowed in some schools, even in the US. So in Missouri, for example, some schools, the parents can opt in to allow their child to be hit with a paddle if they misbehave in certain ways, which is really crazy to me to think, like, if I was an adult and I went to work and I got to work late, my boss is like, well, this is the 5th time you've been late, Jeremy. Turn around and hit you with a paddle. Like, no, we would never do that, right? He would be arrested for assault, right? But if a child is late 5 times and they're like, oh, you've been late 5 times, we're gonna hit you with a paddle now because you've been tardy, they can do that, right? So that's really a bizarre understanding of what that teaches the child about the world and how they think about right and wrong and what that means about their particular experience. So another example I have is more of a local example. So this is about when Iowa City was deciding what to do with their city park pool. So they have this pool that's been there for a long, long time. It's right by Hansher. And they had a lot of discussion about what should we do with the pool? Should we renovate it? Should we tear it down? What should we do with the, should we make it like with water slides, or should we make it like, keep it more of what it is? And if you look at some of the discussions that people had about that, some of the comments were things like, well, we don't want the pool overrun by children. What? Overrun by children? So some of the neighbors were very concerned it could be loud if more children came to the pool. Or it could be disrupting of their quiet lap swim time if there was water slides or things that were built in the pool that would, in their view, destroy their ability to enjoy the pool themselves. And now, I'm not saying we should build everything just for what children want, right? But if you look at the conversations around, when we got the survey to vote on what of the 3 options that they were recommending, I opened up the survey and I laughed because all of them were really adult-centric pool choices, very much focused on lap swim, very much focused on keeping very few children activities there, like a small slide. They might put like a small like kiddie slide in one end because they don't want it to be too loud or be overrun by the children. They don't want in the neighborhood things. So that's
don't look like the Coralville pool.
Right, because that was very crowded all the time. So it's horrible because you can't even swim there because it's so popular. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. So and if you look at how they got the voice of children in that process, they didn't really do that very well. So they had one meeting way out at Lee, which is on the other side of town. Like if you're a 7-year-old, like how are you going to go out and tell the out at Lee Recreation Center that you want a certain thing in your pool, right? Or how would you even know to go out there and do that? So it's very much the process focused on listening to the adults, especially the neighbors who own homes in the areas and giving them what they want rather than really listening to what would serve the children of the community. So that's an example we can talk about more later, but thinking about how do we as a community think about, for those of us who aren't parents or those who are thinking about how we make our community a place where parenting can be effective and support parents more effectively, that's kind of another frame of that. It's not just up to you as an individual, but it's up to us as a church, as a neighborhood, as a city, to make it a place where we can make successful parenting easy to do. Okay, next one.
Oh yeah, every child is unique. They don't come with instruction manuals, and as soon as you feel like you have it figured out, something changes, right? And now it's like, what just happened? Where did this stage come from? How do I parent in this stage? So I feel like that is a big part of the challenge and opportunity and excitement of parenting, but also frustration sometimes. It's like, just when I thought I had maybe something kind of figured out that works, then something changes, or I have a new, like, oh, now I have another driver, and how is that gonna, whoa, like, so always something new to happen. And I can't remember if we have a bullet point about this or not. Oh yeah, okay, sure. So everybody knows how to parent your children better than you do. But they don't actually have to do it. So give yourself grace for that. But also, I feel like, especially in a church community, you know, Jeremy and I are both lucky that we have grandparents nearby who can be very supportive. Also, sometimes they tell us things like, well, your children should have to clean their plate at every meal, and you should put how much on there you think they should eat. And, you know, like that might not be my choice about how to parent at the dinner table. But that's, you know, that's the model that they had growing up and what they had to do and maybe what they did to some degree. And so there are people who will help you. I have gotten so much help in my parenting journey from our parents and from other people in church, but there are other times where it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna let that piece of advice go by because I don't think it either matches our parenting style, our children, or what, you know, pediatrics and science actually tells us about how children develop. So
the last thing I think is all parents have done something they later regret, and so part of the challenge is to figure out how you learn and grow from that rather than dwelling on those things that you wish you would have done differently. And trying to model that unconditional love for the child and for yourself as you go through it, because it can be difficult and everybody does things that they think, I shouldn't have done that, and then regret that. And so learning, and sometimes I take notes myself on, like, especially around certain events, like this is what we did last year, and so I put notes down like, oh, don't do that again, or plan this a little early, so sometimes I put down notes so when I'm coming back around to like, oh, what did we do on 4th of July last year? I can look and see like, oh, we did this and this and this, and they didn't like this, and I like, you know. So there's a chance to kind of learn and help yourself along as you go, so you don't have to feel like you always get stuck repeating things that you don't want to do. Okay, so let's talk about parenting philosophies a little bit. You had some great examples from the Bible, of examples of parents in the Bible.
well, I just thought this should make us all feel better, right? I mean, honestly, the parents in the Bible really struggled a lot. So Adam and Eve, one of their kids killed one of their other children, you know, so that was not a great thing that happened to them as parents. Noah and Noah's wife, who doesn't really get a name, but you know, they like shepherded their children and their wives on this boat, and then one of them later humiliated Noah. It's this weird little passage in the Bible.
He's like naked, right? He's
yeah,
naked, and they
drunkenness, naked. I mean, maybe,
they cover him up, but one of them peeks or something.
yeah, somebody peeked at him. So, I mean, just all the way down along this list, there's lots of examples in the Bible of people who had very challenging parenting experience. Some of them had a really hard time becoming parents, like Abraham and Sarah. So Abraham sort of was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to become a parent with your maidservant, and that's how I'll become a parent. And then also ended up with 2 sons, you know, half siblings who spent the rest of their lives and their community's lives sort of warring against each other. Yeah, I don't know that we need to go through this whole list, but David and Bathsheba. David, their son was Absalom. He was the one with the great hair. So I thought I should mention him because children with great hair. But he eventually like rebelled against his father, and they were, you know, battling against each other. And his son got stuck in a thicket, I think, because of his really great hair, and was killed by one of David's men, which was really tragic and sad for him, because you can be angry at somebody or be in conflict with them and still really love them and wish that something bad hadn't happened to them. But even Mary and Joseph, as we learned a few weeks ago, you know, lost Jesus for a period of a couple of days when they probably should have been keeping track of him a little better or understood him a little better. So there are lots of examples in the Bible of parents who are still trying to figure it out on the job.
All right, so what we'd like to do is have you think a little bit about either your own or your parents' parenting philosophies. So what we'll do is I'll have you kind of think through these and then just briefly share with somebody sitting near you about, it might be best if it's not your spouse, because that way you can, maybe unless you haven't talked about it before, but share with somebody near you about what your philosophies are. And some areas to think about are how you handle rewards and punishments. So what are they? What are they offered for? How do you manage those kinds of things to encourage or discourage certain behaviors? Authority and decision making, so who gets to make decisions? Is it the parents that always decide everything and the children just obey? Or is there some shared decision making? What's the kind of your philosophy around that? Warmth and comfort and nurture. So I saw something the other day about a parent was talking about having a snowball fight with their kid, and they, veered back and hit, like the kid was 7, I think, and they hit him right in the face with like a big icy snowball, and the kid started crying. The parent was like, "Toughen up, buttercup. That's what happens in a snowball fight. You gotta get used to, So kind of what's your philosophy on that kind of balance of warmth and comfort and nurture versus tough kids who need to, toughen up, that make your babies tougher? Or free range, there's all kinds of labels as well, free range helicopter, bulldozer, there's all kinds of, so is there a label that you think about yourself when you think about those different parenting labels? And then, like you mentioned earlier, what does success look like for you as the parent? And what are some of your goals that you think about for success for the child, either as you as the child or your own children? So let me give you just 2 or 3 minutes to think about some of these categories, and then we'll look at some, how these philosophies might apply to some common parenting challenges. Okay, so we're going to see if I know you probably have more to say. We'll have maybe 2 volunteers who want to share some things that they talked about. So raise your hand, we'll bring a microphone around, a couple things. What was interesting that you shared, or something you heard from your partner that you wanted to share about parenting philosophies?
I was just saying that I heard about this last weekend, so I started talking to Jordan, my husband, about our philosophies, and it was strange. We have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, how little we talked about our philosophy. we parent okay pretty good together, I think, but for us to actually say, this is our philosophy on why we do it this way and what's right versus wrong, we've never really talked about it before.
I think that's probably pretty common, that most of us just sort of do it, and then unless there's a particular thing where it's like, oh, I don't think, should we spank them or should we not spank them at this moment, which I would say the answer is usually don't do it, find some, but, or, how are we gonna react to this situation? There's a lot of it that just is like, oh, okay, we're doing it this way. So sometimes it's helpful to really sort of think through both what do we wanna do and why, yeah.
And it's sort of that innate, like, this is what my parents do, so this is what we'll do. So having that chance to talk about it, and especially with somebody you're parenting with, and it is really helpful to think through some of those things. Yeah?
Go along with Kat's thing of talking about parenting philosophy. My wife and I, while we were expecting, we're talking about all these things that we're going to do, and like, we don't want to do this because this is how we grew up. And then Dory was born, and she's 2.5 now, like, what were those conversations, like that first 6 weeks or 2 months, like, what were those conversations? Like, we're definitely, you kind of forget about those things too, and then you kind of just like, there's no instruction manual, and once, you said, we think we have something figured out, no, now it's completely different, and she learned things from daycare that, it's like, oh, that's not exactly what we want, but since you're going there 4 days a week,
You also have to follow their.
we're gonna roll with it, so yeah, we had those discussions, but it's like, yeah, it kind of went out the window, but no, we do like, there are things that we agree on that we want to do this way, and as long as, and if we don't like what something happened, we wait for Dory to go to nap time, or I really like how you did that, or I really want this to happen next time, so it's kind of just keeping the window of communication open.
Is there one more? Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that it's so different in the stages as they grow and per kid. So we had one of our kids was, rewards were highly powerful with her. Like, we could get her to do things with a reward chart. The other kids were like, eh. We had a couple of kids that, like, you put them in timeout and they, like, I'm 2 years old, I'm missing my 2 year timeout because I wanted to play. And the other ones were like, sitting in timeout and, well, like, just back at it. So, like, it's so different for every kid, and it's so different for every stage.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like to, like, put a label on our parenting is not really fair for us because, and I think, to be honest, when they were little, we agreed more as parents than as they got older. And we've started to disagree a lot more because our kids are so different and so their personalities are so different. And then I think it just has taken us by surprise that it's not as natural as it was when they were younger. I don't know.
Well, let me ask one more, if there's any other thoughts about the last question about what does success look like for you or for your child? Is there anyone else who wants to share? I don't know if you made it that far through the topics. I know we only give you a few minutes, but what does success look like?
We didn't make it to this, but the thing I always think of is what one of my friends told me, who's an excellent mother herself, but she said, you know, I don't care if my child is the best at soccer or playing piano or whatever their goals are in life, but it's, as long as they're happy and kind, those are the two things. So if you can get them through life on those two principles, I think that's successful.
So something we'll talk about again next week in terms of spiritual development and things as well. So we wanted to get to, so thinking about your philosophy, we're going to look at some challenges at some different stages in life. And I know you had like an introduction we introduced you about some challenges and a nice picture of a hippo eating one of your children. So we'll think about that. So think about how that philosophy kind of informs some of our thinking about these strategies. We're going to talk about some different areas, but first we're going to do an introduction.
I don't know, I like taking funny pictures of my kids, let me get away with it sometimes. Pulling this one out of the hippo at the St. Louis Zoo, I think.
So what happened to the It's always the young one.
I know, it's always the young one that's eaten.
Right?
Yeah. This was actually probably trying to recreate a picture sort of that I took with my cousins. There was a cannon that you could like shove a kid in, and so we shoved one of the kids in the cannon. So they looked like they were shooting out, and then there was another kid up against the wall getting shot by the cannon. I like putting kids in stuff. So what can we do? I think like our goal for all of us together is to talk about, you know, what are strategies that we can do that maximize success? Because again, it's super challenging, but also super fun and exciting to figure out like what makes each child tick and how do we help them develop to their potential so they can be a happy, healthy human being, at least with the cards that they've been dealt. So knowledge, skills, and attitudes are three different types of things that, like when we talk about continuing education in medicine, we're often trying to say like what knowledge can we give people that helps them do better at whatever they want to do? What skills, like what hands-on, you know, like, oh, I could approach timeout this way, or I could realize that timeout isn't going to work for this kid and I need to come up with a different strategy. And then attitudes. What attitudes help us to get through this with as much grace and success as possible. And then again, staying engaged in the process of parenting each child, realizing that it's a process that changes and that we're learning because again, we weren't parents until we were parents. And so now it's like, oh, okay, I have to learn along with this the whole way through, so.
I don't know if you have anything else you want to share with the core strategies, or if you covered?
Yeah. Well, healthykids.org. So again, as a pediatrician, the American Academy of Pediatrics is sort of our national body for pediatricians, and then the family-facing side of that is healthykids.org. So it has lots of information that can help with sort of specific targeted problems, whether that's tantruming, or we just experienced a death in the family and I'm trying to figure out how to provide grief support or conversation to my kids. So, and then for attitudes, I think, again, love and compassion, curiosity and continuous learning, and then logic. There's a book called Parenting with Love and Logic, which is the one parenting book that I remember reading at some point. And I really liked the idea that you're sort of using natural consequences and allowing kids to experience that to some degree in safe ways, so they realize like, if I punch my brother doesn't want to play with me anymore for a while, you know, like that is a consequence of what I just did. Or if I bite my brother, we had a biter for a while, that was exciting.
My brother would fall into my open mouth.
I mean, why did they do that?
My mouth was open, and his arm would fall right on there, and it was really his fault.
It was a reflex, yeah.
Yeah.
But thinking about like what are the outcomes of what we do, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see, we may make it through all these stages, but here's some of the stages we're looking at: infant, toddler, school age, adolescents, young adults, and possibly beyond. I think this duplicates a little bit of that, so.
Yeah, so one of the main things with behaviors is like what is causing the behavior. And the two major categories are either they want your attention, or they want something, or they want to get out of something. And they, so if the behavior is, I don't want to clean up my toys, and so I'm throwing a temper tantrum, and so I put them in timeout and I clean up the toys, then they just had a successful strategy. They, got to sit quietly in their chair while I put away their toys for them, right? So that, so realizing what are they trying to get out of the behavior, or if you're on the phone and they're, like they say, mom, 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 or dad, 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 and then they start sort of pitching a fit, and then they bite somebody because, now they know they're gonna get your behavior because they just did something bad, what is something I could try to replace for them? And so I know Tim's mom told us once, if you want, like when they're toddlers, if you want my attention, come and put your hand on my arm, and then I will know that you want to talk to me, and as soon as I can, I will, pay attention to you, and I'll make eye contact in the meantime, so like, you're gonna get a turn. You don't have to escalate your behavior to get my attention, so.
Yeah, the idea that all behavior is communication, and that's something we
Yeah.
work on in the classroom too. So if a student is behaving a certain way in the classroom, it's communicating something and trying to figure out what that is. Maybe it's I'm hungry, or maybe it's I didn't sleep last night because I had to stay out late with mom when she was working at her job, or whatever it might be. So it's all communication behaviors, or all behaviors communication. So what are they communicating, and how do I respond to that kind of deeper level of what's going on rather than just the behavior itself? Okay, so we got some scenarios here to think about. So what we'd like you to think about, and we'll have you can work with the same partner you did before if you'd like. But as you think about each scenario, think about the stage of the child. So there's a very different way you respond to a crying baby as you might to a crying teenager, for example. And what are the core strategies of your parenting philosophy? So what's your instinctual responses? What my parents did, so this is what I'm going to do. Or how does that affect your kind of short-term and long-term consequences of that choice? And then thinking a little bit about, we have a lot of different parents in this room, a lot of different philosophies, and so how might those using a different philosophy of parenting respond, and what might be the outcome of that versus what you might do. And knowing that every child is different, how would you know if you were successful? So how would you gauge, like, putting the child in timeout and cleaning up the toys while they're sitting in timeout? How would you gauge if that was successful or not, right? If maybe tomorrow it happens again, maybe that wasn't successful.
Yeah.
So thinking about that kind of how do you determine or think about your success in gauging, like, hey, did that strategy work or not? What does that look like?
Right, and we grew up in different families, right? So whoever you had children with, you both had different sets of parents. And you might have, again, daycares or grandparents or babysitters who have other strategies. So very important to sometimes, especially if you're hitting a challenging moment, discuss openly with each other because maybe you have totally different philosophies from how you were raised, and you're not realizing that you're, applying those different strategies without even really thinking through what's going on.
Okay, so first scenario, this is infant. Why won't you stop crying? Okay, so let's turn to a partner here, talk about what's your philosophy of parenting, how you respond to this. Why won't you stop crying?
Maybe go back to the other slides.
Okay, we have one or two folks that are interested to share. Shares? Why won't you stop crying? How do you think about this from your parenting philosophy? What's your strategy?
Reaction where I need to deal with this right now. I have to.
I don't know, I heard something back here that made me think, I'm hungry and I haven't slept enough, and that's why I'm crying as the parent, and I have to go to the bathroom, and I haven't had a chance to put you down. It's that might be why you're crying and why I'm crying.
I think it's helpful sometimes to take your perspective of long-term or short-term.
Mm-hmm.
This child is going to eventually stop crying.
Yeah.
And so if you have that long projection, it makes the decision what to do about it easier.
I had a coworker who's had a baby that cried pretty much continuously for the first year of life.
I
like, well,
was
just-
that baby.
You were the baby. Yeah, and it was hard, but they tag team, they pass it off to the other spouse, and pass it off to grandma, or pass it off to the next person, and so I think it's another thing to think about is, it's not just the two people who are biologically related to the baby, but it's also the community, the neighbors, the relatives you have nearby, others that can help you, so you're not necessarily in that position. Or physicians too. Sometimes it's an earache or something else going on that you need to talk to a medical professional and find out, oh, it's a matter of put a couple of drops in the ear and it's going to soothe that and I'll go right to sleep. So sometimes just getting help and not feeling like you're on your own is a big thing too.
And I think when you approach it with that perspective, the adult relaxes and the child senses that.
That kind of goes with what I was about to say, is I feel like in the infant stages, later on, a lot of it is how can I support my child and what they're going through, and I feel like in the infant stages, you're trying to figure out how am I responding to my child, and that's your first experience of acknowledging that that impacts the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there have been different theories over time, but attachment theory, you know, that like babies need to have adults who are responsive to them and who take care of their needs, and you can't really spoil a baby, you know, right away. There are things later on that you could do that might not help them to develop their own independence, and there come phases where you're like, okay, I'm trying to teach you to sleep in your own bed, in your own space, and so I'm gonna let you cry it out for a period of time and let that behavior, you know. But again, we can have support of other family members and other people and realize like it might be really hard to listen to that crying for an hour tonight, but it might only be a half an hour tomorrow night, and then in 2 nights it might be just a little, you know, 5 minutes and then a whimper, and it's gonna, you know, we're gonna get somewhere. But at first, you're really trying to help that baby see, I am responding to your needs, and you're trying to see how can I do that. And I don't know, the other thing I do want to just say is, babies cry a lot sometimes, and again, I was apparently one of them. My middle name is Joy, but my nickname was Joyless. I cried all the time. And you can put down a crying baby. If like you are so frustrated with them, like put them down, go put your, you know, like, do what you need to do, call in some help. Don't shake the baby to make them be quiet, or, you know, put a pillow over their face, or other things that might be in that moment of your exhaustion and maybe lack of knowledge and skills that could hurt that baby. So please do, and encourage other people that you might be, if they're just overwhelmed with how much a baby is crying, you know, let them know, like, it's okay to leave them in their crib and call for some backup and some help.
Okay, well, let's move on to the stage 2 here. This gets to be a little bit different kind of challenge. So toddlers, I want that toy. You know, punch, tantrum, I'm not going to bed. It's not bedtime, but they act like it's always a surprise when it's bedtime. It's bedtime. What? How can it be bedtime again? I just went to bed last night. Or I'm not eating that. So dinner time. So what are the things, so thinking about strategies, what are some developmental things? Trying to figure out what that behavior is communicating, and then there's some non-negotiable things. And how does, and then I'll start to get into spiritual development as well. What does that mean for developing spirituality at that age too? Okay, so let's find a partner and chat for a little bit about those toddler challenges. Okay, so let's see if we get a few that would like to share.
Yes.
What strategies either were used with you or did you use as a parent? What other strategies did you consider or might others consider?
Something that my wife and I think we've done well just based off experiences. I'm the youngest in my family, so I had plenty of experience watching the 8 nieces and nephews before my daughter was born. When it came to food, we just put the plate on the table and say, here it is, are you ready to eat? No, I want to go play. She goes play and we start to eat. And then it hasn't been a time where we finished our meal and she has not come and wandered. We recently got a step stool to her booster chair so she can step up into the booster chair, so we get that ready and she will come and eventually, sometimes I don't like that and we have a no thank you bowl, she puts it in there, and sometimes she'll finish her food and then the no thank you bowl was a lot less full somehow than, and it's not on the floor, so those are just things right now that are working for us and we're riding that until the stage changes. We're just eating and then she'll come and, you know, we're providing for her and that's just the best we can do, so.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, starting the meal, you know, I'm not hungry yet. We both, I think, grew up with, it's time to eat, sit down at the table, we're all sitting at the table together. And my parents especially would like take her and kind of, sit down now. And she'd wiggle and scream and, be mad about it. And so that's when we kind of switched to, you go play, and when you're ready, come on over. And she'll trot over 2 minutes later and just be so happy and ready to eat. So trying to give that independence and patience on our end as adults to know that she'll come when she's ready, and when she's hungry, she'll eat.
Yeah, so that strategy kind of utilizes that, kids usually don't like to sit at the table as long as adults anyway, right? So, and one of our goals as a parent is often there can be competing goals. So one goal is that, okay, when, there are times when somebody says, let's do something, everybody has to do it at the same time, but there are other times where we're trying to encourage your independence in figuring out when you're hungry and how much to eat, and, so you can kind of choose your strategy depending on what works. I love that we have a little boundary tester over here, which is like totally what toddlerhood is about. She was standing in that doorway looking back like, should I go out again? Should I not? So they're testing boundaries all the time, and we have to decide, like, where are we going to put those boundaries for safety? There are some really important ones for safety, but some other things can be a little bit more of a, negotiable depending on what we think is going to work best for this kid.
So I think at this age, I started to list some of those, what I would call non-negotiables, and they might be different for different parents, but what are those safety things that are like, nope, we don't get to ride in the car without a safety, without the safety seat, or nope, you don't get to just run across the street, or, so what are some of those non-negotiables that you're thinking about, are like, okay, these are the, this is the boundary, you don't go across this, and at toddler age, it's, the concept of trying to figure out that what they understand about safety and self-harming stuff is still pretty limited, so it's the rule because it's the rule, and you follow the rule, and sometimes that's just enough for a toddler, is that's the rule, you don't walk into the street, that's the rule, and they're still trying to comprehend like safety and some of that kind of stuff. So sometimes that there's, think about what those are as a parent, and what are the non-negotiables, and they might change at different ages. One of the ones that I struggled with at toddler age was getting shots for the children, because it's their body, like having people poke you and do stuff to your body without your permission is not an okay thing. But at the same time, you gotta get your vaccines, and you gotta be healthy, and so how do you navigate that with a toddler? We had one toddler, I won't say which one it was time to get a flu vaccine, was holding on to his pants with a death grip, because they were getting him the shot in the leg, with a death grip on his pants, running, no, away from you've never had that happen in your clinic either, I'm sure, right? So I'm trying to think about,
trying to do better about, approaching.
Getting a vaccine is probably a non-negotiable, but how do we do it that way that respects their control of their own body, their safety of their body, and not teaching them that, doctors and parents get to do whatever they want to your body, because that's not acceptable either, right? So thinking about how do we navigate some of those things in ways that help the child understand why they're having this done, and what some of those places are where they can decide as well.
Anybody else want to share?
I was going to tell you my dad's strategy. I still have an older sister, and he told her we were going to go to the doctor and I was going to get a shot, and he told me we were going to the doctor and she was going to get a shot. So we both went willingly, and we both got shot.
That sounds like something, I'm knowing your dad, what he would have done.
I've never forgiven him.
Well, and I think at this age, kids are starting to pick up on routines, so it's often very helpful to have some kind of a routine that they begin to understand. Crossing a little bit into the routine of going to church, I think, is a great one. Getting to know other adults, in life, in church, so Sunday school teachers, people in the nursery, people who are willing and want to hold your kids, for a little while, or give them a hug, or, a special interaction. That's part of what our church community, like when we all say yes to whatever we say at a baptism, we'll have to pay attention to what that is next time, but we're saying we're going to help support and raise this child, as a community of faith, and so that's, I think, one of the important aspects of toddlers are learning that trust game. Who can I trust? Who are safe people, and we want them to both have appropriate, boundaries, but also have some new people that they can start trusting.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to stage 3. I don't think we'll do a discussion on this one because we're gonna run out of time, and I want to get to the a little bit older age too. So school age, they often start to have rules at school. They also often start to have friendships with other children that maybe you don't necessarily have the ability to navigate or negotiate with them. So things like being a victim of a bully, so why is this person so mean to me? Or being a bully, so why won't so-and-so just do what I say? And then developing more of that independence. I can do it myself, I want to do this myself. How do you kind of navigate them wanting to do things on their own that maybe previously you did for them, or not sure if they really can safely do them on their own as well. So I don't think we'll do the discussion here. I'm going to get to another older phase. But again, some of those things like what are the non-negotiable health and safety things. So maybe there's more choice over food, but they still have to eat. Especially when those things may become possible disorders if they're not eating at all, or if there's certain things that they're eating that are not healthy for them. School safety, firearm safety. What are some of those non-negotiables that your family will have? Working through those challenges, understanding those behaviors, and then a different type of spiritual development. Think about school age, so being involved with other children at church, adults at church through VBS programs, other things, Sunday school. Other informal activities, foundational knowledge of the Bible, so understanding what it is, what it isn't, learning some of those songs, and faith and prayer. So in those moments of emergency or when crises come up, with death of a family member or something like that, they have something to kind of center themselves or fall back on when they have those crises that come up.
Yeah, and we might talk more about this next week, but modeling some of those things at home too, and I think the 25 Live program is trying to be designed that, then you've got some things that you could use in the home. It doesn't have to be on a Wednesday night at church, but that could give you a way of having some of those conversations with school-age kids. But lots of important modeling that can happen, like if you choose that you're going to pray before meals or pray before bed, or have other ways that you're comfortable expressing your faith and leading your kids in that.
Okay, so let's do a discussion on the teenagers here. So teenage years, really pushing those boundaries, trying to find more independence, navigating the transition to adulthood. Here's some example things that scenarios that teenagers may bring to you. Everyone else gets to X, Y, Z. Why can't I do that? I don't need your help. I can't, or kind of the extreme of the other side of that. I can't do anything without your help. Do this for me. Tell my teacher that I'm not going to do this, or tell my teacher this and this. Or I'm old enough to make my own decisions, so I will choose what I want to wear to school. Okay, I'll give you just 2 minutes here, and then we'll have a chance to kind of wrap it up and have our discussion here. Okay, so we're going to run out of time here, so I want to talk about teenagers just a little bit. So thinking about some of these strategies for teenagers, how are you thinking differently about this stage in life? Your parenting strategies, how does your philosophy kind of change as they get to be teenagers? What are some things that people have done? I was saying, it was just when we were chatting, I was saying, well, I really appreciate the Waterloo schools because they have very strict dress codes at school. So it's like, hey, that's what the school rule is. That's what you got to wear. It's not so strict here. We don't have a teenager yet, but I'm not exactly sure what the dress code is here. It's essentially like no tobacco, no alcohol, and like try to limit the swear words if you can on your clothing. Yeah. So I appreciate that the school kind of stepping up and saying, hey, you got to wear this and this and this. These are 5 choices. Pick from those 5, and they'll kind of set some boundaries. But what are some other things that you all have identified as strategies for teenagers?
I think negotiating boundaries is good. My wife Pat, our youngest son, came and said, I want to dye my hair. Just really white, just to be different and stand up. And she said, yes, you may do that, but you can't get a tattoo. So the negotiation is made. Tattoo, obviously, the hair was...
Yeah, the tattoo came first. Can I get a tattoo? No. Can I pierce my ears? No. Can I turn my hair green? Yes. He worked up to it.
Set the boundaries.
Yeah, he was negotiating with knowing that the first couple would be...
He's a theologian now.
You can have more of a discussion with them about issues, and I think that's important that you have the discussion instead of just being like, oh, no, why would you do that? Or no. And obviously there are some non-negotiables. But I think as teenagers, it's a great opportunity to just try to teach your children and talk about maybe your experiences as a teen. And what's really hard is to let them fail. It's really hard to watch them fail, but it's okay too, and they need to do that. And I think as a parent, I still have struggles with letting them fail. But I think having the discussions are important and talking to them about it. So we have a kid right now who really wants Instagram. All of his friends legit have Instagram. He wants Instagram. And he keeps having this discussion, and I'm more on he's got a point, and he's more like, it's so bad for your health. So we've been having these continual discussions about what that means. And so we haven't come to an agreement yet, or a compromise, but we're getting there.
Right, and at least the fact that you've had the discussion and maybe openly with the child, they are aware that there might be some dangers to your health, from things like that, in a way that maybe other kids do. I don't know if I've had that discussion with my kids, like.
Right, and he's a smart kid, so
Yeah.
I do think that this conversation has helped him be aware. He still wants it, so.
Yeah, and thinking about what those non-negotiables are, they're a little bit different at teenage years too. So internet safety is still a big one, but mental health, suicidology is a big issue for teenagers, a leading cause of death of teenagers, and especially related to firearms. Dating violence becomes a real thing as well too. So how do you think about some of those kind of issues that show up in the teenage years that were not things that when they were younger, and how you kind of navigate some of those non-negotiable? What are some of the boundaries? How do you make that a place to learn about those things? And then, of course, spiritual development is very different for teenagers as well. We'll get more into that next week, too. But I wanted to kind of wrap up here the last stage of course. This was a scenario, meet my new spouse. That's it, they're married now, right? So what do you do is that you never stop being their parent, right? But the kind of sway you have changes as they get older. So, no matter their age, they're always going to be your baby at some level, right? Even if they marry some weirdo.
So what do you like your spouse
I like being weird.
Other people.
So what if you like their spouse better than you like your child?
Oh.
You never know. So I think just in summary, there's no one right philosophy, but it's important to understand your philosophy and talk about it with those that you're parenting with. Where did it come from? Is it based on your own experience of your parents and modeling that, or rejecting things your parents had done, or is it from TikTok? Well, it's not TikTok anymore, but social media, or things you've heard, or other parents, or thinking about where that comes from and reflecting on that, like what is the goals I have for myself and for my child? How do these strategies and how does my philosophy help me get there? And then thinking about each child is different, knowing that there's different phases that we have to address, and that there's, even within a particular philosophy, like you say, I'm a free-range parent, well, there's still a wide range of strategy options within that kind of philosophy, and thinking about which one is most appropriate toward helping us to get toward that goal. And then also, this is my own personal thing as somebody who teaches about child rights, but are there rights protected as a child too? Are we respecting them with the decisions we make about these strategies? And there are some things that they're outside the bounds of what I would consider appropriate parental decisions, like paddling is an example. Like that's not respecting the child's right to have protection over their body. So thinking about what are those things that I have, those choices within those boundaries as well as a parent. And don't go it alone. So don't be afraid to ask family, neighbors, teachers, physicians, mental health care professionals. There's tons of state programs that offer support, parental learning groups. There's the Coralville and Iowa City and North Liberty all have parenting advancing classes and things that they offer through the city parks department and things. So there's lots of places to not feel like you have to do this alone, and there's lots of people out there to help you. The schools have lots of programs as well to help meet special needs of children at all ages and things. So don't feel like it's just up to you, and the community really raises the children, not just the parents. And thinking about eventually, often, and maybe not always, but often you get what you give, and modeling the type of person you want your child to become. And my example is, there was a family I knew growing up who the kids kind of were troublemakers and often misbehaved, and then the parents took me to an event somewhere, and on the way they're like, okay, if they ask, tell them all you're 11 so we get the cheaper rate on getting into the event. Like, oh, well, it's probably where the kids got it, because they're following what their parents do, and modeling this kind of untrustworthy things that they were doing, and kind of bending the rules to get certain things, and that's what they saw their parents doing. So there's some of that too, that sometimes it's just modeling what you want the child to become, and hopefully that some of that will rub off on them. So any closing comments?
No, but I can close us in prayer. Okay, let's do that. All right, Parent God, we thank you for allowing us the privilege of working with the young ones that you've put in our lives to steward parenting and and raising them as a community and as a church. And we pray that you would give us guidance, that you would give us wisdom, and help us to continually be curious, creative, loving, and compassionate parents, and leaders to those around us. We pray for our children that you would bless their development and growth and help them make good connections, have safe people that they can talk with, and that they would reach the potential that you have for them and that we could be a part of that. We ask all this in Jesus' name.
All right, thank you. Next week, we'll chat about the